Jonathan had a pile in his bedroom. It sat in the corner, staring forlornly at him, and Jonathan couldn't be absolutely sure, but he was pretty certain that the pile was growing bigger and almost had a life of its own. Jonathan's pile had started off quite small. It had begun with his old football socks and smelly yellow t-shirt. Jonathan knew that he was meant to put his dirty clothes into the laundry basket in the bathroom, but naughty Jonathan had simply left them on the floor in the corner of his bedroom where the pile had first begun. The pile had started off small and harmless, just a few dirty clothes and his missing swimming goggles, but before too long it became a natural dumping ground for anything that Jonathan couldn't be bothered putting away. The pile got higher. It started to swallow things up, like Jonathan's school books and yesterday's lunchbox. The pile started to get quite greedy. It engulfed Jonathan's bookshelf and soon started gnawing on his racing car magazines. Things at the bottom of the pile started to get damp and just a little bit smelly. The pile stole Jonathan's new tennis shoes, and then it ate up the dog's lead. Despite looking everywhere for it, the dog's lead was never found, and the family had to go out and buy a new one. The pile was getting hungrier. The pile soon covered at least 1/3 of the floor space in Jonathan's room. Jonathan was glad that his parents had said that it was his responsibility to clean his room himself. The pile was becoming almost embarrassing. Luckily, Jonathan's mum hardly ever ventured into Jonathan's space. Jonathan sat on his bed and stared at the pile. It was getting very high. The pile had taken Jonathan's new cleanly washed and folded underwear and his favourite towel for swimming. The pile had taken Jonathan's computer games and the memory stick for his digital camera. The pile had even taken Jonathan's favourite blue teddy bear. Even though Jonathan was getting a bit old for toys, he liked to know where they were and was devastated to realise that the bear had been lost to the pile.
Here, Teddy.
More and more things were disappearing. The pile was starting to look very pleased with itself indeed. Jonathan wasn't quite sure, but he could almost swear that the pile was starting to groan and gurgle and to make weird, digestive kind of noises. Jonathan looked at the pile, and the pile looked back at him. The pile was starting to take over. Jonathan could feel the floor space in his room getting smaller and smaller, and now the pile was starting to block out the light from the windows too. The pile was also very definitely now starting to exude a special kind of pong all of its own. It was not a nice smell at all. Jonathan didn't like the pile anymore, and the pile certainly didn't like him. Jonathan wasn't quite sure what to do. Jonathan was pretty certain that the pile had stolen the essay he'd completed for school, the essay that was due to be handed in on Monday morning. The pile was getting out of control. The pile was getting just a bit too big for its boots, and Jonathan knew that action needed to be taken. It was time to have it out with the pile, but how? Jonathan poked his foot into the base of the pile. The pile squealed and hugged its contents tightly together. Jonathan figured that he'd start at the top. He ever so slowly lifted something down from the uppermost echelons of the pile. It was his red rugby jersey, the one that he'd thought he'd lost weeks ago. The pile had been hiding things from him. Jonathan was not impressed. Jonathan pulled on the sleeve of the red rugby jersey. The pile wasn't willing to let it go. The pile didn't want to give up, and it didn't want Jonathan to take back his belongings. The pile had worked long and hard to get as high and as wide as it was, and it wasn't prepared to back down now. Jonathan pulled and pulled on the sleeve of his red rugby jersey. The sleeve stretched and the stitching made odd snapping sounds, but eventually the pile let go. Although it was big, the pile wasn't very strong. Jonathan took his red rugby jersey into the bathroom and put it into the laundry basket. The pile was tough, but Jonathan was confident that now he could fight it. After all, it was now or never really. If he didn't show the pile who was boss, the pile would take over, not only Jonathan's bedroom, but his entire life too. It took Jonathan 3 days to fully conquer the pile. By the end of the battle, he was bruised, beaten and exhausted, but had unearthed a myriad of well-loved missing objects and his fully completed school essay and favourite blue teddy bear. Right at the bottom of the pile were Jonathan's old football socks and his smelly yellow t-shirt. Football season was about to begin again, and the pile had finally gone. Until the next time, that is.